play right, cause they can't miss. All about the game, that's a cold switch. Serving up the truth, call it ruthless. Tune in and get your fix from Blake and Vish Sports.
So recently on this Thursday night game, Russell Wilson, big injury, right? I want to say it was his tendon in his middle finger that was wrong. It was dislocated as well. People were thinking he could come back in and play, but we saw Geno Smith. He came out and looked really good. We hadn't seen him play in forever, it seemed like, and he looked really, really good. But Russell Wilson's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks, and this is huge, right? He's been an Iron Man. He's pretty much played every game for the last, it seems like, decade, and now he's going to miss half the season pretty much. So this kind of begs the question, could this be his last season here? We know this offseason there was a list of teams he said he would like to get traded to, or if he were to get traded, where he would go, which is just weird because then he came out and contradicted that by saying, oh, I don't want to leave, but if I were to leave, here's where I want to go. There was contract disputes, all of that. So Vish, do you think this will be his last season with the Seahawks?
Yes, I do. I think this is the end. I don't think Seattle really has the assets to put together a much better roster than what they currently have. I mean, their starting corners are DJ Reed and Sidney Jones. DJ Reed, who was cut by the Niners, Sidney Jones, who's been cut by multiple teams since he was drafted coming out of Washington. They obviously don't have draft picks because of the Jamal Adams trade. Jamal Adams got a big deal this offseason. A lot of their core players are aging outside of Adams. You know, Russell Wilson is not that young. He came into the NFL when he was 24, I think, and he's in his mid 30s or early 30s now. Early to mid 30s. Dwayne Brown is obviously old. Bobby Wagner is getting up there. I mean, 12 years, or excuse me, I think 2022 will be his 10th year. 10 years for a linebacker. I don't know if he can continue at this level. And then, of course, Quandre Diggs is also a veteran player. So you just go down the list. A lot of their core players are aging. They don't have a lot of money in terms of assets. They don't have draft capital. I don't see Seattle getting much better. And I think that we've reached a point where the Seattle scheme defense playing the match cover 3, which is what they like to do, I think it's reached its point where the league has completely caught on to it. I don't think that front troubles people. I don't think their back end troubles people, even though they got 2 really good safeties in Diggs and Adams. I think the one thing with Seattle they've had the consistent is Russell Wilson, and this year I think even though he's playing at an incredibly high level, I feel like he's not controlling the game the same way he's controlled it in the past. And I think a lot of that is because Seattle's not controlling the game with their offense. Like everybody, we talked about this last year. Everybody hates to let Russ cook because it feels like an old, outdated system to run the football so much with Chris Carson. But that allowed Seattle to dictate game flow, and it allowed them to dictate and control the ball and play with control the pace of the game, which ultimately protected their defense and gave Russell Wilson an opportunity at the end of every game. And he's Russell Wilson, one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. He's always going to get the job done, and he always has gotten the job done. We're seeing at times that being a quick strike offense that scores fast, it puts a little bit more pressure, and it really exposes their historically bad defense. And then the last thing I wanted to add, obviously, I when I was talking about their core players, and Jamal just brought him up in the comments, is I missed, of course, DK Metcalf, one of the best receivers in the NFL, and Tyler Lockett, who's also fantastic. There's also Metcalf's. They're going to have to pay Metcalf this offseason. He's going to have a big ask. I don't know how they're going to fit all of that in. I think that Russell Wilson ultimately does end up seeking the trade that we thought he was going to seek last offseason. And maybe I'm just praying for it as a Niners fan because Russell Wilson, just too many bad memories. That guy's way too good. But I think this offseason he seeks his trade and he ends up playing somewhere else. And, you know, Pittsburgh looks like the spot to me. We talked about Rodgers with Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson for Pittsburgh is also a really, really nice spot for him because you have, you know, Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool, who are both fantastic. Maybe Juju comes back, and you have that terrific defense with that menacing front.
Yeah, and I think it'd be perfect because they also don't have a good O-line, and I feel like Russell Wilson just can only operate with a bad O-line in front of him, right? That seems to be his whole career besides when he was on his rookie contract and their team was loaded. Um, I'm with you on the Russell Wilson aspect of it. Like, I could see why he would want to trade. This team's not getting any better. They don't have their first round pick, which is going to be a top 10 pick at this point, it looks like, or at least, it doesn't look like they're going to make the playoffs. Um, I just don't get it from the Seahawks side, though. Do they think they could retool their roster by trading him? Or do you think they should go on a full rebuild? Or do you think they should just kind of ride it out with Russell Wilson? Because I could see both of those being the options. I don't think they will be able to put a Super Bowl caliber team together, just how their roster's constructed. I mean, all their good guys, besides really Metcalf, are on their second contract or getting up there in age. I think this would be a good time to tear it down. Maybe get rid of Carroll. He's been there for a long time, and I know he's had success over the years, and I think some of that's tied to Russell Wilson being there for so long. But if there was a time to kind of just for them to go in a full rebuild, just get as much as you can for Russell Wilson, get as much as you can for maybe DK. I'd probably keep him though because he is so good and so young. But
Dwayne Brown, maybe.
yeah, Dwayne Brown, maybe I don't even know if Jamal Adams would trade him,
Diggs.
but yeah, Diggs. See what you can get for some of these cornerstone guys and start the rebuild. Now, not all teams want to do that because it's really hard to kind of put that on like your ownership to just tank for a few years and be really bad. But I don't think if Russ comes back next year and finishes his contract, which he has a couple more years on, I think there's no way they compete and actually ever make it to the conference finals or championship games. So I think this would be a good time to rebuild. But the issue is like they don't even have their first this year, which really kind of puts a damper in things. Do they trade Russ at the end of the year? They'll still have a big cap hit. Dead cap's 26 million after this year and then 13 million the next. So that's a lot. I think they're just in a sticky situation on should they just completely tear it down. I'd go that route, but there is an argument to be made for them to kind of, see what they can do with Russ for the next couple of years. It's just tough when their roster's so reliant on him pretty much being just the guy that is the ultimate band-aid for a roster that really this past decade or past half decade, I don't feel like has really been comparable to the other top teams.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think you covered a lot of things that's important. Like Seattle's best benefit is honestly to do whatever Russell Wilson wants. If Russell Wilson wants to stay, then just do whatever you can to make this roster
Mhm.
better and go all in with Russell Wilson because you have one of those quarterbacks in the NFL, and there's not that many of them, but the kind of guys that you feel like you have a chance every single year to win a Super Bowl with. I think their biggest issue, and Russell Wilson's contract is also a little bit of an issue with this because they have to pay him so much money. It's very difficult to build a great roster when you have a lot of highly paid players. But their issue to me is that they have another quarterback in this division who's looking like he's gonna be one of those type guys that Russell Wilson's been. And right now he's still on his rookie deal and he's still got 2 more years on his rookie deal, which allows Arizona to, really stack it up because Kyler Murray's really special. I said last week on our show, I think Kyler Murray's the best quarterback in the NFC West. And I'm sticking with that. And it's not because Russell Wilson still isn't special. It's just Kyler Murray has more juice right now. Russell Wilson doesn't have that same athleticism today that Kyler Murray has. And so I think that gives Seattle a little bit of trouble. And then you talked about the rebuild, right? I mean, it's not ideal. It's not what any team wants to do. But the only way Seattle, sans Russell Wilson, is going to be able to put together a Super Bowl caliber roster is if they um, just tear it up. They get whatever assets they can, they reaccumulate assets, they clear cap space, and they build a new. Now the chances of doing that and building a roster that competes every single year the way they have with Russell Wilson, it's
Mm,
still unlikely because you're
mhm.
probably not going to find a quarterback like Russell Wilson. And sustained success in the NFL is all about if you have a special quarterback. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to find one. But I think that Seattle has reached a point where I think there's only so much they can do. What else can they do to this roster? I mean, the best thing they can do to honestly make their team better is reaccumulate their draft picks and just start drafting and hope every single draft pick is hitting like DK Metcalf. But the chances of that and the odds of doing that are very slim because it's very hard to hit draft picks in general, which is why Seattle has over the last few years drafted guys like an LJ Collier that hasn't worked out. And so because of all those reasons, to me it's a no-brainer where this thing is kind of coming to a close. And Russell Wilson, it makes the most sense to me for him to go to his next team. And I think Seattle does have the opportunity to then rebuild it and be as good, but it's just going to be hard.
And I was going to touch on this too. Like you mentioned that they're drafting. I think John Schneider, the GM, he should be on the hot seat right now. Dating back to 2016, here's some of their first couple round picks. Jermaine Ifedi, Jaron Reed, he was pretty solid. Malik McDowell, Rashad Penny, LJ Collier, Marquise Blair, DK Metcalf was a hit. Jordan Brooks, Darrell Taylor, and then this year they took Dwayne Eskridge. These early round picks have just been misses for pretty much the most part, and they haven't really been getting much in the end of rounds either. So their drafting hasn't been good really at all. They've got a few guys in there, which, I mean, I think law of averages, like you're going to hit on a couple of them, right, at some point. But yeah, just generally speaking, they've drafted terribly. They really, like the way they've acquired players is just from those earlier drafts in the early 2010s, Russell Wilson, Bobby Wagner. Like those are their two keystone guys, and they've just had them forever, but
And
they
I have
drafted poorly.
So I have actually a theory also with why they drafted so well in 2010, 2011, and 2012. Those were the three drafts that built this entire Seattle dynasty, basically, because they picked Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Bobby Wagner. They picked all of them in those drafts. I have a theory, and it's similar to so Jimmy Johnson had a lot of success drafting early in his Cowboys career because he came from college football and he recruited all those players, so he knew all of them kind of in and out, and he knew which ones were really good, which ones were really bad, and he was able to just draft them, and get them on his NFL roster, and then they drafted really well. I think that the Seahawks drafting really well in 2010 to 2012, like you said with John Schneider, it's more of a case of Pete Carroll than it is John Schneider. Pete Carroll just came from college football. All those guys would have been guys he's recruited, especially like the guys in the West Coast, like a Richard Sherman. I mean, they did. Bobby Wagner went to Utah State, I think, so he's another guy that was from the West Coast. And so Pete Carroll would have known all those guys. He's recruited all those guys. And to me, that it was just a case of Pete Carroll knowing all of that and being able to draft those guys because he knew them in and out than it was like John Schneider being this incredible scout and just going over down and just finding diamonds in the rough. And then, of course, the brilliance in drafting Russell Wilson, that everybody deserves credit for that. But I'm with you. Like, at some point, like I understand Seattle doesn't have a lot of draft picks, so it increases their margin. Like they have a high margin for error. They don't have a high margin for error, excuse me, because they don't have picks. But at some point, to me, I think that Seattle needs to just tear it up, and I think tearing it up might include Pete Carroll's going and John Schneider going. And I guess I called it a dynasty. Excuse me. I didn't mean a dynasty. I just meant an extended period of success in their run.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was looked at as kind of the beginnings of a dynasty potentially.
It was.
It could have been otherwise if they would have won that second ring in 2014, but
right.
That is beside the point. So yeah, that's Russell Wilson. Really, is this his last season? I think we're both kind of on the boat. Either they just try to go all in or just start fire sale on the whole team and just kind of build from the ground up there. Maybe get rid of Carroll, maybe get rid of the GM. Who knows?